Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Pierce County Council meeting and Tuesday's study session. It's Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. The time is 12:01 p.m. All members are present except for Council members Denson and Kruver, who are excused. I will check the Zoom room to make sure that neither are participating over Zoom this afternoon. And I do not see that to be the case. So they are both excused. Item number 2 is review of today's council meeting agenda. Ms. Long, to brief the council.
Thank you and good afternoon. This is this afternoon's amended council agenda. I did go over the consent agenda yesterday. Nothing has changed, and you'll also note that the supplemental has been removed. So that is not included, but no other changes. So unless you have questions, I'll just continue. Moving to section 7, we have proclamations and we have one award today. The first is the presentation on the Vision 2050 award. Betty Capistani from Economic Development will be here, and Josh Brown from PSRC. Next is the proclamation proclaiming August 24th as the Humane Society for Tacoma and Pierce County Day in Pierce County. And who did we decide? Councilmember Kruver will be reading that one. And then the third is proclaiming August 31st, 2023 as Overdose Awareness Day in Pierce County, and Councilmember Hitchen will be reading that one. Under section 8 ordinances, we have 2023-24, and this is the veto override vote on. And then next is 2023-21. This is the one that was discussed yesterday. My understanding is the motion will be to postpone indefinitely on this one. And then number 3 is 2023-29. This is amending chapter 448 of the code. This is related to county funds. And there is one amendment to that. Mr. Boki discussed that yesterday. So unless you have questions on that, we will continue. The fourth ordinance is 2023-31. This is authorizing the approval of applications for open space classification. And this is for parcels located in unincorporated Pierce County. This did not go to committee, so you'll be taking final action today. Under section 9 resolutions, there is one today. It's our 2023-122, and this is approving the Human Services Department and Behavioral Health Advisory Board's 2024-25 funding recommendations for the Behavioral Health Therapeutic Courts Fund and Liquor Tax. This was forwarded to the full council without recommendation at Health and Human Services on August 15th. And those are your agenda items for this afternoon.
Thank you. I do want to go over a couple of things in a little bit more detail since we're together here in study session. Want to note that we do have some guests planning to be with us from the Asia Pacific Cultural Center to help us in our reflection for our moment of silence today, which will be dedicated to the continued wildfire tragedy in Maui. And so we have some guests to help us reflect upon that. Members at your places, there are Hawaiian flags for us to show our solidarity. If you wish to wear a state of Hawaii flag, that has been provided for you, and we have many for staff as well. So I wanted folks to know about the plan for the moment of silence. Councilmember Herrera, we have you scheduled to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and our land acknowledgement today. Under ordinances, item number 2 under ordinances, proposal number 2023-21. We talked about this briefly yesterday. The recommendation is going to continue to continue this indefinitely because I'm not aware of a date certain that will be appropriate. And I think council will certainly entertain bringing this back. However, it seems to me like there's more staff work to do, both with the neighbors surrounding this piece of property and with our own internal departments like the Parks Department to just do more work to make sure that this really should be surplus and it really is not needed in the public interest. and how to resolve the issues that have come to light in our email boxes. So that is the recommendation, is to postpone, is to continue indefinitely, postpone indefinitely. Again, that gives the option for the executive department to bring it back at a future date. But I want to be clear, the purpose is to give more time, and we expect more staff work to happen in the issues that I just indicated. Neighbors, there's encroachment issues that we're aware of, and our own Parks Department in particular needs to be more thoroughly consulted to make sure this is not in the public interest to keep any part of it. So that's the purpose of postponing indefinitely. Are there any, let me pause there before I get to another item. Are there any questions or comments about that recommendation and that plan? Okay, then I just wanted to move us to the resolution on our agenda, proposal 2023-122. This is the resolution approving Human Services Department and Behavioral Health Advisory Board's funding recommendations for the next biennium for the Behavioral Health and Therapeutic Courts Fund and liquor tax. This had a presentation and discussion at the Health and Human Services Committee. They moved it forward without recommendation because of a few committee questions. I wanted to invite Ms. Merrick to the podium and ask Ms. Merrick to make sure that we all understand the questions that were asked, the answers that she helped collect from the department, to make sure we're all on the same page and be able to have a discussion here in this setting about what we've learned since committee and see how council might want to proceed with this. Ms. Merrick.
Thank you, Chair Mello. Good afternoon, members. For the record, Lee Beth Merrick, council staff. Before you were discussing our 2023-122, which is the behavioral health tax funding recommendations. This was in Health and Human Services last Tuesday. It was forwarded without recommendations because the committee had several follow-up questions. Primarily, the questions were around the applications that were not recommended for funding and the scoring criteria. The department did work really, really hard to compile that information for you. So I do want to recognize that. It should have hit your inbox yesterday morning from me with details about all of the projects that weren't funded. So what the document looks like, it's the spreadsheet that they used for the funding recommendations. They just added to that the projects that weren't funded with the scores. So I think it starts on page 13 of the hard copy. You'll see the project description, the fund request, the score, the location, and then those targeted areas of services. So that's the first follow-up item that they sent. They also sent their scoring rubrics. So they used two scoring rubrics for the evaluators. The first, it's just a 2-page evaluation sheet. This was for projects that had received funding in 22-23. So just looking at how well they had utilized the funding from the existing 22-23 fund sources. The second evaluation application is 18 questions. They could rank from 0 to 5 on those. So I think a total of 80 points possible. And that details all of the criteria that the evaluation committee used for all of the applications. The last follow-up item that was requested, there were 3 projects that members had specific questions about as to why they were not recommended for funding. And so the department did provide the factors that they used on those projects. The first was the United Way Navigator program. The department responded that the evaluation committee prioritized direct services over navigation programs, and that they thought the United Way had easier access to fund to other funds for this proposal than the other applicants may have. The second item that members requested specific information about was the behavioral health supports at the Orting Veterans Village. When you look through the projects that weren't funded, you'll see that a number of housing programs weren't funded. And this is because the department is looking at this more from like a system perspective and taking the approach that they will utilize one provider, Community Life Resources, to provide the behavioral health supports in permanent supportive housing. So when they would be contracting with the various housing providers that had provided, they realized that each of these housing providers would be contracting with a behavioral health provider to provide the services. So rather than having multiple contracts for one service, they thought it would be more efficient just to work with Community Life Resources on one contract to go into these various permanent supportive housing communities. The third item that was requested was the medication assisted treatment for opioid use disorder in jail. So this was the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department that would be providing this. They proposed to provide it at the county jail, as well as I think the women's correction in Purdy. So for the first part, Human Services did contact the jail, and county detention officials indicated that the project was not feasible. And then for the portion that would be funding Department of Corrections, that's a state facility, they have state funding. And so they determined that county dollars should not be used for this. So those are the various items that the committee had asked for more information on. You should have all of that in your email. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Merrick. We do get a lot of email, and so I wanted to make sure we paused and we were able to bring this to light and really make sure we understood the responses we got from the department in light that this resolution is on today's agenda. And in the event council wishes to continue for some reason, I'm not sure that we do now that we've gotten the summary of the response, but if we do, I want to be really clear about why, because we really are trying to make sure the department has enough time to contract with providers before the start of the year, because we know we've heard about extensive concerns about how long it takes to contract with Pierce County. And so we do want to make sure we give enough time for the department and providers to work together on contracting for the difference of the year. So with that, I'm going to open it up for further questions and dialogue about what council wishes to do with what we've learned about the behavioral health tax investments. We'll start with Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. And if this was addressed in something I missed it, forgive me. So we have the scoring there, but I don't understand where the scoring comes into the decision making, because there are several lower scoring items that got funded over higher scoring items. And so at what point do they take the scoring, set it aside, and then say, but this is what we're going to fund?
So I think that's a fair question. Director Moss, I don't know if she's available or if she's online. Did get to this a little bit in her email response.
Excuse, I'm
Oh, yeah,
sorry,
is
Ms.
she
Merrick. Can you,
online?
you're bumping her?
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect.
Please proceed, Ms. Merrick. I'm sorry.
So what they look at is also, I think, variety of programs. So they're not trying to have several. Is she on?
She's a panelist.
Okay, several programs that are doing the same thing. So they're also looking to make sure that they're addressing the various targets within the behavioral health improvement plan. I think geographically too, they're looking at that in terms of where services are located. So she did mention that the score is just one factor, and there are other considerations that I'll let her to speak to in more detail.
Director Moss, thanks for being with us this morning to help answer questions.
Sure. I didn't catch all of what Libeth shared when I was transitioning up to panel, but it sounds like she got the gist of it, that for the most part, the scores that we received from the evaluation committee based on that rubric are the first part of the conversation. Then the evaluation committee comes together with staff and they talk through what they're learning from the scores based on the independent scoring process, and then use that information to make sure that there's a balance across the geographic area of the county, across the different service areas that they want to make sure we focus on, and alignment, as Libeth talked about, with other investments that we're making. So having one provider provide that case management across multiple treatment facilities, for example. And then the final one is looking at the past or current performance of providers that we already are funding, using all of that information to then refine the list based on the scores that we started with.
So that second level of scoring is not reflected in here.
It is. I mean, it is, I mean, that's why you're seeing this, we don't simply just go down the list based on the scores and fund the top highest whatever until we run out of money. That's where that whole discussion that I just described is what happens after the individual scores come together. We collate all of their scores, and then we use that as a starting point for the conversation to make the final recommended list that we present to you.
I think in some of the backup materials we were sent, there was the questionnaires that are filled out and an additional scoring based upon what their performance level is. Is that right? And that scoring.
Yeah, we also
isn't
do a
provided.
financial analysis. Is that what you're talking about?
Sorry, I had it here up on my screen a moment ago. It was basically the part that goes through and asks, you know, how do we think that, how well they're performing? How well did they perform last year? Did they meet what they said they would? And their scores provided there.
And staff
And I assume
generally complete that.
that's what's looked at in the second phase. Those scores
Correct.
weren't provided to us, correct?
Correct. I mean, that's what then, and I don't know if we have actual scores, we might, I can ask the staff for that, but that's the information that staff present to the evaluation committee, and they collectively come up with the prioritization based on a compilation of those two data sets.
Okay. So what we have here is one of the data sets. We don't have the second data set before us.
You have the scores from the evaluation committee. You're correct. I don't think that we adjusted the scores, which I think is what you're asking, based on the input after staff provided their analysis of current practice or current experience, right?
Right. And so
Okay.
we didn't adjust the review score,
Right.
but who got moved above the line and below the line was impacted by the second data set. And we
Correct.
don't have access to the second data set.
I don't know what form of, I don't know what form that's taken, right? I don't know if we have that list, but is that something you want to see?
Hold on that for a moment, because I mean, that's asking for a lot of work and I don't know if it's going to change things, at least in this process. But I think going forward, making sure that we have the full data sets, and maybe some of my other colleagues would like that information. I will pause for now and let others ask, and then maybe come back for some more follow-up questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks for those questions. Mr. Winsberry, before I call on Councilmember Morel, can you bump Director Gary Robinson and Julie DeMuth, both attendees? We may need them in the conversation.
Yes, sir.
I think that's it for now. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Merrick, for answering the 3 questions, but I have 3 more questions because you answered the 3 questions. On the United Way Navigator program, which is, I think, the 211 program, I know last time there was a problem with them being left out or not knowing what the deadline was, and we ended up funding them in, I think, a supplemental budget. Is that something we're going to have to do again because they're not in this budget?
So I can speak to the background on that. I can't really speak to something you have to. No, you don't have to fund any program. I mean, you don't have to fund United Way Navigator program if that's a council decision. But what happened previously is they had been receiving, I think, funding through MCE county funds. That funding had expired. They weren't aware of the behavioral health tax funds. And there was supplemental funding available. So when those recommendations, the Behavioral Health Advisory Board and the department issued the RFP for the supplemental funds, they brought their recommendations forward to council. And I think that's when United Way realized that this was a funding opportunity that they had not been aware of or that they had missed. And so what the council decided at that time is to include them into the supplemental funding. Moving forward, the council has the decision if that's something they want to do again or not
Okay. Well, I
through the
just-
budget.
Right, and I just don't want to set up expectations that it'll be a continuous, that our budget will now become part of their budget when there are other funds available. So just wanted you to touch base on that one. The behavioral health support at the Ording Veterans Village. As you know, the Veterans Village is the only tiny home village in unincorporated Pierce County. And we met with them well over a year ago and suggested, because one of the biggest challenges they have within their community is mental health, behavioral health issues. They just do not have the resource to deal with it. So we challenged them to think it through, come up with a program and submit. Which they did, and obviously we have the answer. What guarantee can I get that Comprehensive Life will work with the Ording Veterans Village to provide behavioral health services to them without some bureaucratic tie-up on addressing their issues in rural Pierce County? So how do we write that in? How do we make that request specific enough that they understand that that needs to be a priority for them? So like you say, I agree, we don't need to create siloed systems out there. But if we're going to use one, group as the behavioral health go-to on mental health issues, I need to know that there's an open door and we can get access to them and not just, well, we're gonna get the project up and funded. It's gonna take a year to do that. In the meantime, the Veterans Village just suffers through their challenges. So how do I get guarantees that they will follow through?
So I think first, something that the council can work with the department on. I know the department has been taking this work very seriously and has been working through contract negotiations. And that's something that they're very skilled at, working with the providers on identifying maybe some gaps and opportunities. So that's informally something that we can talk to the department about prioritizing with Comprehensive Life Resources and Ording Veterans Village. I think for the council, you have the opportunity in your upcoming biennial budget to proviso some of this tax funding. So you might not be able to say that Comprehensive Life Resources will provide this to Ording Veterans Village, but you can certainly proviso it in a way to let the department's executive branch know that you are prioritizing funding for behavioral health services to be provided at Veterans Village in unincorporated Pierce County.
Director Moss, love to hear your thoughts to the question as well.
I second Libeth's points about working with our provider. I don't know the details of what was proposed by CLR in their contract or in their application. I believe that based on what we just heard around prioritizing this particular provider to provide services across the system would include Ording, but I will have to verify that with staff before I can provide any sort of guarantee, Councilmember Morrell.
Okay. I know the Comprehensive Life knows that the village exists, but it's a long ways from their headquarters to Ording. And I don't know if they've ever been down there. So I just want to make sure, because in this whole behavioral health tax program and system that was set up to drive these services out into unincorporated rural suburban areas. And I just want to make sure that's being done, that we don't set up transportation challenges and getting people to and from where these service providers are going to operate out of. So as long as I can work with you, Lee Beth, I'm okay with that. I mean, they weren't asking for much, but I just got to make sure that, you know, they're going to be there to help them out. The other thing that I just want to make sure is they're again setting this program up. One of the key performance metrics that we wanted to make sure we measure, and I know it's going to take a little while to get the outcomes, to get the data points. Are we being impactful? What are we changing lives, or are we just supporting systems that look good? I mean, I want to see lives changed. I want to see people helped. And are we collecting the data that shows that the $29 million that we spent last biennium or whatever it was, are we making inroads? Are we finally starting to see the ship turn a little bit? How are we measuring that?
So I can speak first to this and then I'll let Director Moss chime in. I believe all of the contracts have key metrics that they're capturing for each program. So part of the contract is that providers must report regularly to the department outcomes specific to their project. And then second, in terms of the behavioral health tax, it's required in the ordinance and the code that there be a performance and evaluation committee audit on the program. So that first one I think is coming up in 2024. And then when the program's also scheduled to sunset, there will be a look back to see the outcomes of the program. So you have it happening at the contractual level within the department, but then you also have within the code the requirement that the performance audit committee also conduct evaluation every 2 years.
Okay, so you feel pretty comfortable that the performance audit committee will have the needed performance metrics to say, yeah, we're headed in the right direction.
I will need to check with the staff on the performance audit committee to make sure, but as far as I'm aware, that they have been tracking the information that the department's been collecting and they feel comfortable with the level of data that's being provided.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Moss. Anything to add to that last question about the kind of information we're tracking to determine what kind of judgment calls we can make about the lives changed and the good that's being done with the resources?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to point out that we are not quite through the first cycle of funding. So we are actively collecting data. We're working with current and future contractors to put in what I would characterize as fairly extensive expectations around data collection so that we can make sure that we measure effectiveness of our investments. I believe, Councilmember Hitchen, you might know, I believe that we are scheduled to go in front of the Health and Human Services Committee some point in the spring to share that information from the behavioral health tax. We're working closely with the data team under Julie DeMuth to pull together the scorecards or the dashboards, if you will, around the information we're collecting from our providers. So look for that presentation coming in the next few months.
Thank you, Director Moss. Thank you for those questions, Councilmember Morrell. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to follow up on a couple more. we talked earlier about the dual scoring processes, the one by the committee and then one by staff. On the staff side, how many staff people are looking at that? How many are coming together and combining that evaluation? Is it just, yourself, one or three others? Who's all involved in that?
Our behavioral health team, so that currently includes 3 staff plus the manager. And I did get a message from staff since we started, and I can absolutely send over those scorecards if you'd like to see them.
Okay, that would be appreciated since they're already in hand. At the end of the day, was the amount that the committee was given, was it fully allocated, or was there like an unallocated amount?
So there was a total of $69 million in requests submitted as a result of our latest RFP. We had funding for almost 30. The package that you have in front of you is fully allocating what we believe to be available for the 24-25 biennium, but it's less than half of what was requested. So getting back to your point, Councilmember Morel, about what we fund and what we didn't fund, it's not an easy decision to make. There's lots of need in our community, but the evaluation committee and the staff put together the package that's in front of you for consideration now based on a lot of factors that are tracked in those 2 different scoring sheets that we believe are the best package in terms of what the needs are for the community and what we expect in terms of outcomes from those providers.
And I guess following up on my question of, is there any unallocated amount? The request for the Orting Village was relatively small in comparison to the 60 million. Was there an unallocated amount that would be commensurate with what the Orting Village requested?
Might be a question for the finance department, because remember, we're dealing with forecasting of what investment or what income we plan to see from the behavioral health tax over the next biennium. But my understanding is that what we are anticipating at this point is approximately $30 million available after we take out staff costs.
Okay. And then just one more, and I guess I'll wait to look at the other scoring sheets. But this is where I want to see that is, if I can just look at the 2 communities and schools programs. The one in Lakewood serves 3,000 people, got a score of 49 and got funded in the amount of, what was that? 547,000. And the community and schools of Peninsula proposing to serve 5,000 people with an amount about 20% of the total of Lakewood doesn't get funded, has the exact same scoring. And so that's where but you're sending those other ones out that I'll look at, but that's the things that that I look at and say, how do they have the exact same scoring? One serves twice as many people for 20% of the amount, yet we fund Lakewood, but not Peninsula. So those are some of the things in here that I want to look a little bit more, but thank you for sending over the other information. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good questions, good dialogue. Do we think that we are going to need more time to consider this this afternoon, or does council need more time to think about that? Or, well, is anybody willing to chime in on that? I know that there's been some clear requests for information, which is helpful. If we do continue, again, my motivation here is just to make sure that we're very clear with our staff and department staff about what more we need, what more questions we have, if we're going to do that. And not just tonight. We've had some very specific requests for information from Vice Chair Campbell already, which is helpful. Is there any other direction that any member wants to express? Councilmember Morel?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if delaying it 1 week really hampers the ability to finalize or get contracts going. Is there, if we did postpone it 1 week, what impact? I mean, is there an impact to doing that? And I guess I could ask Lee Beth or Heather.
Just to clarify, are you saying how will it impact the contracting process?
Yeah, I mean, what, if we delayed it 1 week to try and, let some of the dust settle a little bit and let us think about some of the responses we just got, would it be of a negative impact? I mean, what would it do 1 week?
Director Moss?
Most staff are working on drafting the contract templates right now and having some preliminary conversations, at least with the providers that we currently contract with, to start negotiating what the new contracts will look like. It gives us one less week to do the work that we need to do between now and the end of the year to have those contracts done. I don't know what more to say beyond that.
That's helpful response, understanding what the next steps are on your end. Doesn't seem like it's the end of the world. And department staff is working really hard to get folks under contract so that we can walk into the new year, subject to budget authority, walk into the new year with hopefully signed contracts and not waiting months and months into the new year to have a contract.
I do have a follow-up question pertaining to the majority of the allocations. Were they contracted in the first go around?
Yeah, so I don't have it off the top of my head, but I want to say almost like 19 out of the 28 that are recommended for funding were funded in 22-23.
Okay, so they have all their documents should be in order to meet the criteria that finance requires. So nothing really should be new to them that would cause a slowdown in the process.
I'm going to ask Director Moss because I'm not sure if things have changed, if they've changed some of their procurement processes since the last round of funding.
You're correct, Councilmember Morel. The approximately 80% of the contracts or the contracted proposal, the proposed contracts will be with existing providers. 20% of them are new, roughly.
So it isn't like we're bringing on a whole new batch of individuals who got to deal with the requirements, the nuances of contracting with Pierce County. So they're aware of what's going on. So that should move a lot quicker than the last go around, I hope. Is that true, Director Moss? Okay,
I hope so too.
okay, we hope so too. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kimball.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to understand what our options are. Given the amount, and it is like the full 30 millions allocated, so there is not room for an additional allocation. And this may be for Director Robinson. If we were to prepare an amendment for today's meeting or for next week's meeting that said, we want to cut the funding to these two items and we want to fund Fording Village and something else, does council have the authority to do that?
Councilmember Campbell, I would want to review that question with our prosecuting attorney's office on the options, given parameters that the council has outlined for the resolution, having recommendations come back to you. Certainly a possibility.
Not sure I understood. You said that I heard the part you want to review. Are you saying it's a possibility we could do it, or it's not likely we could do it?
I would look to the guidance that's been provided to us by the prosecuting attorney's office and have prosecuting attorney give us perspective on the question that you asked, because I'm hearing the question to be, there are recommendations that have come before you after there's been a competitive process. Does the council have the ability to modify those recommendations after the competitive process is being completed? That would be the precise question I would look to the prosecuting attorney's office to assist us in addressing.
That is the question.
Yeah. I would see, I don't know if we got time to get that answered today. But I think that'd be good to know, because if we don't have the authority to change anything before us, there's no point in delaying. We either have an up or down, if all we're restricted to is an up or down vote on the work done by staff, then there's no point in delaying.
And Council Chair, Councilmember Campbell, I can reach out to the prosecuting attorney's office after the council meeting today.
Thank you. After the council meeting or after a study session?
After your study session.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the clear question. And thank you for the follow-up, Director Robinson. Thank you, Director Moss, for answering our questions. This is a really important investment we're making in our community. And also really making sure we understand the procurement procedures in alignment with this, as Vice Chair Campbell clearly asked, I think is really important in this regard. So thank you. We'll look for more follow-up. And again, if council does choose to continue for some reason, we want to be really clear about it, because we do want to maximize the amount of time the department has to contract with those we give the department authority to contract with, because there's a lot to do between now and the end of the year. I'm not seeing any other discussion on that item. Thank you, members, for the good conversation and the clear questions. Are there any other questions about today's council meeting agenda? Councilmember Morel.
Thank you. Just a point of process, and I'll look to Ms. Long on that. When we get to 2023-24, the veto override, that is an up or down vote with no public testimony allowed.
I think you could take public testimony. I mean, you've already done it when you first passed it, because it's the same proposal. It's up to the council, I think, whether you take public comment. I think I would advise that you do, since it is another final action overriding the veto. But you're right on the up or down. It's exactly the version that you passed, the version that was vetoed. That's the override veto or vote, no amendments allowed.
Okay, I guess my question was more directed at public comment.
Okay.
If we were gonna allow for that, or whether we were just gonna take a vote on it. So, okay, so I guess it's everyone want to listen to public comment on the issue again.
Thank you for the question, Councilman Morel.
Sure.
Any other questions about today's council meeting agenda? Not seeing any. Let's move to external boards and commissions. Mr. Swanson, I'm going to turn to you. Confirm Pierce County Council, Puget Sound Regional Council, largely on August recess break. I'm looking for you to confirm that, and anything else you might need to brief council on at this time.
Thank you, Chair Mello. That is correct. They remain on recess through August. There are Puget Sound Regional Council meetings that start the first week of September. So we are anticipating seeing the agendas for those starting next week, but I don't know that we'll have them by next Tuesday. So if there are relevant things for members on there, we'll be sure to get them distributed through email or calling your CAs or however we need to get that out. So, or we may have them by the meeting next week and be able to let everybody know what's going on then.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Other members who have external boards and commissions reports, if I can start with Councilmember Morel, who I know is prepared to give a report.
Yes, I am. So I am going to give the council a rundown
I feel like you should
on
podium, but
the, on the Paris Air Show. And I just, this is a great opportunity for the state of Washington to showcase anything aerospace. And every other year, the Paris Air Show is put on. And this year we were able to attend. This was the first time post-pandemic that we were able to attend. And I just want to thank the executive office for allowing me to participate in this. I kind of go in lieu of Executive Dan Meyer and enjoy the camaraderie that we have. Within this photo is Pierce County's delegation. We are one of 100 individuals that came from the state of Washington. The Washington State Department of Commerce puts this on and allows us to participate. And in the picture, you've got Mayor Babbitt from Eatonville again. And Mayor Babbitt was a wealth of information. He is a 20-year veteran in the aerospace business. He ran Precision Machinery down in Fife or Tacoma, and retired out of that. So he was able, and this is the first time that he has gone to be able to connect with the different vendors was great. Betty Capistani, myself, Sarah Bonds, and Bruce Kendall from the Economic Development Board. Those are the 5 Pierce County folks that was at the air show. And move it to the next one. And these are, there again, the magnitude of this air show. It's the world's largest commercial military air show globally. And it is just overwhelming the amount of widgets that go into both commercial and aviation. And then you have the military side, everything from drones to missiles from every company from around the world. And so it's a very large display space. It takes 3 days to just walk everything. Okay, next. And what we do once we go to the air show is we're given a list of pre-vetted companies that we visit, and we pair up and we divide and go to multiple meetings during the 4 days that we are there. And a lot of them, there again, are pre-scheduled meetings. We use a consultant from the state of Washington that sets up these meetings, and we go out, and then everybody else from the delegation also is out meeting. Our goal is to, of course, attract companies to Pierce County, but knowing that we're part of a team. So get them to come to the state of Washington. It's great if they come to Pierce County. We'll sell them on that idea, but if we can get them to come to the state of Washington and snatch them from North Carolina or Tennessee, that's great. Okay. And this is the numbers. They've readjusted the numbers. The amount of economic activity that happens within the aviation world, mainly commercial aerospace, the amount of just jets that were sold exceeded $200 billion. And those are probably represent over 1,200 different models. You can see Boeing was able to firm up 300 orders. They've now firmed up, I think, around 400 on the show, after the show. India became the biggest emerging global market for aviation. They have a expanding middle class that is now entering the ability to travel via aircraft. So India was by far, they ordered almost 1,000 jets themselves between Boeing and the other vendors out there. So we won't say the other company, which is French owned. But this is, I mean, the outlook, when I went to Farnborough last year, there was still a lot of depressed expectations in the market. And going to Paris this year, everyone was ready to move forward. They expect a 30 to 40% growth in air travel. And this is how a lot of the airlines, they go to Paris and Farnborough and they ink the deals. So it was great from that standpoint. Next slide. There we go. And this is kind of what we got. And this is what'll happen now is Bruce Kendall and his team will take all these leads that we got, and he will try to meet with them and try to get them to invest in Pierce County and come to Pierce County. Okay, next. And that's it. And one of the interesting, this is the first time that, I've only been twice, so I guess, that the governor joined us. So Governor Inslee and Trudy, his wife came along, and he was presenting on sustainable aviation fuel. That is the big push within the aviation industry due to the UK passing the 2050 Decarbonization Aviation Act. And everyone is trying to figure out how to power a jet engine on low carbon, no carbon fuel. And Washington State has decided to invest heavily into hydrogen. And they are supporting a company called 12, which is opening a plant in Moses Lake to be able to produce fuel alternatives for jets and other vehicles, which would be a greener way of powering. So everyone, that was kind of the talk of how they're going to move towards a sustainable aircraft fuel. It takes a total redesign of jet engines, which has to go through extensive certification. And but they are moving forward. And I think technology will help in that endeavor. Okay, and that was pretty much the air show. And now we're going to move on to the number one subject at the air show. And this is just to give you an idea of what these aircraft look like. This is Boeing's eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. And this is the first demonstration of an eVTOL at an air show.
So I got 5 or 7 engines on it.
What's that?
That 5 or 7 engines on it. It's like 4 or 6 on the wings and 1 on the rear.
Yeah. So these are all electric aircraft. They take off like a helicopter, they fly like a plane. And they can basically land any place a helicopter can land.
We could get one.
There was more discussion about these type of aircrafts because one of the key things that everyone is looking at is trying to figure out transportation mobility. And they feel that these type of aircrafts are going to fill a needed void within urban air space. And so there are dozens of companies vying for positions in the marketplace. There's probably 6 of them that will survive. And Boeing is one of the top competitors within the industry. The biggest hurdle that they have is proof of concept and getting FAA certification for these vehicles. It is very difficult because, and I understand the FAA's rationale is they have to be proven that they're safety, so that they're safe and can operate. This one is piloted, but the future is autonomous. EHang, which is another vertical takeoff and landing manufacturer out of China, has actually gotten certified now by China to operate 100% with an autonomous vehicle. So they're basically going to set up a ride share on demand for these vehicles. And they will have anywhere from 2 to 6 passengers. And the benefit that I see with these vehicles is, with these aircrafts, is the use of, America has over 5,000 airports. A lot of them are in urban, rural areas. And for us, and majority of them are underutilized. With these aircrafts, I mean, you know what a drone sounds like. I mean, just a low buzzing noise. That's what these sound like. So you get away from the air, the noise that carbon aircraft have. And so you're able to operate in now urban areas without the noise of an aircraft or a helicopter. They're super quiet, they're super efficient, and they can travel anywhere from 150 to 300 miles an hour. They're made for short haul, anywhere from 50 miles to 200 miles is the market they're going to go after. The Paris Olympics coming up in, I think, 2025 will Volocopter will be demonstrating with the French government to use the aircraft for moving people around instead of depending on cars and vehicles. So, you know, one of the work that I've been doing and you know, I know Councilmember Campbell has been very involved in the electrification of our airports in what I tagged as next gen. And so one of the challenges that we've been having in Pierce County is trying to attract these technology companies to come down. They're all up north, mainly a hub around Payne Field. So trying to attract these technology companies to come down here and use our two airports has been what I've been attempting to do. And if you remember, the master plan that came before us a few months ago included charging stations, and the FAA has bought off on those. So I think as we move forward, hopefully you will hear more about this. I know the big goal is to have these up and operating for the Olympics in LA, I think in 28. So you will see a lot of work being pushed forward to include these type of aircraft in the transportation system within, like I say, urban areas. So with that, I am pretty much done. So.
Feel like they should have chosen a jet for their icon for military service.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Morell. Incredibly interesting. Thank you for representing Pierce County and helping to do business recruitment and share what a great place Washington State and Pierce County is to do business in. Very interesting report. Any questions for Councilmember Morell before we move on to other updates? I think we all learned a lot. Thank you again for representing us. Do any other members have any other external board and commission updates? I'll briefly indicate that the Legislative Steering Committee of our State Association of Counties is beginning to meet, believe it or not, to gear up for the 2024 legislative session. Had its first meeting post-session last week. And again, beginning to do the early work of framing up what should the strategy be for our state association going into the 2024 legislative session, understanding it's a short session, it's not a big budget writing year, all the dynamics going on that we are aware of, what should our strategy be? So it's early conversations, soon gearing up for much more specific conversations about what the legislative agenda for the state association should be and the focus for the next year. I'll also just make note, you may see some invitations come on your calendar. Well, I know you will be seeing some invitations come on your calendar here for the fall from the State Association of Counties. They're really designing a move around the state. We're invited to other parts of the state, and there'll be a day in the King County, Pierce County area here in the late fall that I'm helping to design with WASAC staff. The whole purpose is to allow members of county legislative authorities to be able to come and see firsthand, what are our biggest challenges, what are our biggest opportunities for us to learn from counties on the east side of the mountains or maybe in more rural areas, and likewise for folks who live in very different parts to come and see what our major challenges and opportunities are. Just to better get to understand the what binds us and why there are differences in priorities. So that's relatively new as I understand it. A lot of work is going on by the WASAC staff to put those together. So when you see those invitations, that's what that's about. And if your schedule allows, it would be great to take advantage of those opportunities to welcome our county council, county commission peers from throughout the state of Washington. Not seeing any other hands for external boards and commissions under chair's topics. I'll just note two things briefly. There is a closed session after this. We are doing it online, so we'll move to that here shortly so that we can be with the staff that is prepared for that closed session. And then the other note that I was made aware of is since the city of Sumner voted very enthusiastically and affirmatively for the library community facilities bond, Ms. Long on our behalf is communicating with the Pierce County Library about the next steps for actually setting up that library facilities board and the oversight. The state law calls for certain oversight for that board authority to support the library board in facilitating that work and facilitating the bond. So again, Ms. Long is working on that in these early days on our behalf. In the not too distant future, there will be the need for us to appoint the 3-member board that oversees the bonding authority. Councilmember Herrera, I'm certain you're going to want to serve on that, and we'll need 2 other members to serve as volunteers. And so if you have some interest in doing that, please let me know, and we'll work with Ms. Long on doing that piece of business to keep that work moving forward. But there's a lot of details going on our behalf, thanks to Ms. Long and the good work at the Pierce County Library system. That's all I have for chair's topics at this time. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you. I did want to bring to the attention of the council. Councilmember Herrera brought it to my attention, and then we had a little talk with Jeff Cox pertaining to the hearing examiner as far as how we're going to fill that position. It's my understanding that the hearing examiner is basically done. His contract is fulfilled, and he is not going to renew the contract. If you remember right, the council brought him back for a 1-year time frame as we tried to sort things out. And I guess we haven't sorted things out yet. And he is leaving, my understanding, the end of September. He is gone. So I'm just curious to see kind of how we're going to proceed with filling that position.
Thanks, Councilman Morel. I know staff, including Mr. Cox and Mr. Taylor, who's on short-term medical leave, as we all know, has been working on this very question on our behalf. Before Mr. Taylor's medical leave, there's been some extensive work going on, doing some analysis of, what is the right function for a county of our size and complexity? Should we bring that function in-house? Many communities have a hearings examiner that's a staff person. There's still independence in the operation. I think it's really important, that extreme importance, that there's independence with the hearings examiner. Many communities, King County, Snohomish County, City of Tacoma, or folks of our size and complexity have that as an internal function of their municipal operations. Others contracted out like we have, and have had a contractor like we have for some time. And many smaller communities, of course, they don't have the volume of hearing examiner work, so they contract out the service. So thank you for reminding us of that. I just wanted to set up that conversation, that I know Mr. Taylor and Mr. Cox have been thinking about this and doing an analysis, both from a customer service perspective and a financial perspective. Is it time for Pierce County to transition to this being an in-house function where it's an employee of Pierce County? Or do we still stay with the contracted model? That analysis has been ongoing, and thank you for prompting us that there's a very firm deadline for us to figure this out, so that, again, customers who need the work of the hearings examiner can continue to get that service and get a decision and move on with their request in front of the hearing examiner. So I'll follow up with Ms. Long and the team so that we can continue the work.
Okay, thank you for that update.
We're at other business. Is there any other business by council? I'll note that under proclamation review, there's a proclamation being brought forward by Councilmember Hitchen for suicide prevention awareness. It is currently scheduled for next week. the content of it is at the end of the study session agenda packet. Is there any other business by members? Not seeing any, Ms. Long. Is there any other business before council today?
Not today, thank you.
We'll ask you to brief about the close. Is there a need to make an announcement? There's no need to make an announcement of the closed session. There's not going to be any business after the closed session as usual. But there is a link on members' calendars for us to enter a closed session virtually. So we'll let members get to that. And our next scheduled meeting is at 3 p.m. today. So we'll stand adjourned. Yep.